GM and GN, everyone, this is Clément from Commit, and today I'm with Sebi from Quantstamp. Hey Sebi, could you please introduce yourself?
GM everyone, really happy to be here. Thanks a lot, Clement, for inviting me. I'm the CEO of Chainproof, which is Quantstamp's regulated insurance subsidiary, and also head of Quantstamp Germany, where we have one of our main subsidiaries in Europe.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining us today. So let's kick things off with the first question. As the head of both Quantstamp Germany and Chainproof, could you tell us why some people say that it's a really bold question, that regulation in Web3 security is like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, and how you're addressing this challenge?
Oh, that's a very interesting analogy. I know people in Web3 are very adverse when it comes to regulation. It's a very polarizing question indeed. I think when it comes to security, that is a area of Web3 that we should definitely do more together with the regulators. And this is because as Web3 auditors, we cannot force projects to actually address and fix the issues that are found during audits. A regulator would be able to do that. An auditor is really just not able, because the blockchain is an open space. Anyone can deploy any contract at any time. Auditors don't have any special power to block projects from deploying contracts which are not completely secure. So I think in that sense, I would really welcome regulators to look at this part of the space, at the security aspect, and maybe create something like a recommended list of protocols, right, which have been vetted by the regulator. And the vetting would have to do with someone checking that the issues found during audits were actually fixed.
Okay. So before we go further, I'd just like to address that when this podcast will be released, there is some information regarding Quantstamp that we won't talk about, also about regulation in the US, because this is not the main topic of this podcast. So if you have any concern about it, just go to Quantstamp directly. We are not doing like the we are not the head of complaints, so just talk to Quantstamp directly. This podcast is only about security, DeFi, and audits in general. Then I have a more a more witty question. If you have to explain me DeFi insurance, well, I will rephrase the question. Could you explain me DeFi insurance if I'm 5? If I'm 5?
I can try. So one thing which is very problematic in the DeFi space are the large amounts of hacks and the amount of funds being lost to these hacks that happen pretty much on a weekly basis. So to avoid these kind of losses for your end users, you can opt in to purchase DeFi insurance, which is going to cover you in the event of a loss. Similar to how you have car insurance that is going to help fix your car in case of an accident. This is what we're trying to create, and what we've created actually for DeFi. Does that work as an explanation for a 5-year-old?
I think it could work. And for example, because I'm not 5, but I'm 33, like when I broke my car, my insurance will say that, yeah, this does not cover when you have an incident, when you have an accident, and you have to pay yourself for that. But I've already paid the insurance. How this works in the DeFi spectrum, in the DeFi ecosystem?
It's actually very similar. So, we have a regulated entity that offers insurance policies on, like traditional, you can do it like pen and paper if you want to. So there's a contract, and in the contract, it's clearly stated what is covered and what is excluded, right? It's not a extremely lengthy document. It's like 4 pages, right? And the text is not extremely small, but still, it's maybe a lot to read for some people, right? What we've seen in the past with our customers, they're typically institutions that have a dedicated legal department that goes over the entire policy, and we negotiate what should be included and what should be excluded. Of course, the more things are included, the higher the premium price. So there's a trade-off between including everything that you wish to be included and the actual price that you pay for the policy.
Fair enough. We usually say that code is the law. This is like something really wide. Yet in DeFi, we have seen many cases where the code was indeed failed. That the code has failed to do its job. How does this discrepancy, sorry, play into your approach to the Web3 insurance?
Yeah, I think like that's why insurance and security, is necessary, because it's nice to talk about code being law as long as it's not affecting you personally. But I think once someone has suffered a hack, and has lost funds, their opinion about this statement is a bit different. And I think the statement could be slightly adjusted, as in, the intention of the code is law, right? Like the way in which the code was intended to work by the developers is the actual way in which it should work. Of course, no one's perfect, and code will always have bugs. So that's why these hacks happen and why insurance is necessary.
So, okay, so based on that, how much, because there's more and more Web 2, if I can say so, or traditional company that wants to explore DeFi, for example. In your experience, how much does the conventional insurance sector really understand about DeFi? And do you think that they could be a threat to your business model in the future?
That's a very good question. We actually started off this journey in the insurance space back in 2018. We started off as any other crypto native company, and we wanted to build something which is, fully on chain, peer to peer. And when we had built it, we realized, well, launching something like this without the license is a no-go. It's nice, it looks nice, it works nicely, but we will have, issues down the line if we don't have a license. So our second attempt was to go out and talk to insurance companies and convince them to put capacity and their licenses behind this technology that we built. And behind, of course, like the Quantstamp audits, because we went to them and the first thing that they asked is, where's the data? Is there sufficient data to build an actuarial model that could help us price the risk? And we said, no, there isn't. right? This was 2019. But we said, okay, there's not sufficient data, but what we have is, a very good methodology of assessing the risk, and therefore we can use audits to price the risk. But at that point in time, traditional insurance companies were definitely not ready to enter this market. They knew very little about it. They were, sometimes we went into a meeting and people were asking us, how do you plan on insuring the price of Bitcoin? And that's definitely not what we want to do, right? So people were still looking at this purely from a token perspective, and we were looking at it from a cyber insurance perspective, right? And it took us 2 years to find two traditional insurance partners that understand this. And that was Sompo, which is based in Japan. It's Japan's second largest insurance company. And Munich Re, which is the world's largest reinsurance company based in Munich, Germany. So with these two partners, we were able to, take a step forward and create this new entity, which is called Chainproof. It's fully licensed and regulated in Bermuda, and it's licensed to offer this innovative new type of insurance, which is for non-custodial smart contracts. So we're not really focusing on custody insurance, which has been a product on the insurance market for a few years now. We're really focusing on non-custodial smart contracts. In addition to that, we've also started offering slashing insurance for proof of stake validators.
That is a very interesting answer, and I'm quite intrigued by something you just said. Based on the fact that Germany and Japan are really strong countries regarding the law, regarding the way they work on every sector of activity, it quite intrigued me that this was regulated offshore instead of inside the EU, for example. It could have been in Luxembourg or in Ireland or even in the Netherlands. Is it possible to have more information about this choice?
Of course, yeah, of course. So this was a recommendation from our partners at Sampo, and this came due to the fact that Bermuda is one of the first, probably the first jurisdiction that has a clear digital asset law and regulation, which was already approved by their government in 2018. So they were extremely early to put out clear regulation when it comes both to digital asset businesses, but also insurance in this space. So it was just a natural place to go because of how well educated the regulator is with regard to this space. We're basically having monthly meetings with the regulator in Bermuda, and they are extremely well educated when it comes to this, to Web3. This is not something that is very frequent in other jurisdictions. We're actually now starting to look at other jurisdictions because we want to expand where we have our licenses. And having this entity in Bermuda, and given that Bermuda is a global hub for insurance, is of tremendous help to us when it comes to talking to other regulators. So we've talked to regulators in different EU countries, and when we mention that we have a Bermuda entity, they know that Bermuda is sort of like the Mecca of insurance, right? Okay. So everyone has a connection to the Bermudian Monetary Authority, which is the regulator for insurance, and they can quickly ask about us, and get a good reference. So that's actually it was a very good decision to start there.
Okay, perfect. So you I mean, you have already partly answered this question, but could you paint a picture of what the ideal regulatory framework for Web3 security would look like to you? Like the boundaries, the needs, the flexibility to accommodate the rapidly evolving DeFi landscape. I know we are talking about DeFi mostly, but as an audit firm and security firm, you are allowed to audit anything from for NFTs, for example, for basically everything. But mm, in this particular case, it would be about DeFi.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a bit, because it's about decentralized finance, it's quite difficult to strike, an optimal point if you're talking about any kind of regulation, because, when you add regulation to the mix, it becomes less decentralized, right? But still, when it comes to security, I do feel like there's something that needs to be done, because there's just too many hacks, too many entities, both retail and institutional, losing funds. So my ideal regulatory framework would be that a regulator is educated well enough to be able to look at audits provided by top tier auditing companies. So yeah, maybe first of all, they need to have a list of top tier auditing companies. And that's already not an easy feat to achieve, because there's literally hundreds of auditing companies out there. But I think, like, with track records, they could put together a list. And based on that, if a project gets an audit from one of these companies, they would not only look that the audit exists, but they would be able to check, once the audit is completed. What we do at Quantstamp, we generally mark issues as fixed or mitigated or acknowledged, right? And if a regulator looks at this final report and sees that there are many issues that are unresolved or simply acknowledged, which basically means that, the project acknowledges that this is a risk and they just accept it, but they do not fix it. If a regulator sees this and sees that some of the issues that are unfixed or acknowledged could lead to a catastrophic outcome for the end users, they simply, they cannot block the project from launching. The project will launch if they want to launch, because it's an open, blockchain. It's an open network. But they can decide to have, a recommended protocols list or an unrecommended protocols list. And I would say, this is just talking from the point of view of audits, but we can go much further. One of the main reasons for all of these losses in DeFi are also rug pulls. A regulator could simply ask a project to perform a KYC and AML, which would reduce the amount of rug pulls that are happening. If the project leadership is, like KYC'd, it would deter them a bit from engaging in these kind of malicious activities of rug pulling. Moreover, if we go back to the security aspect, audits are not the only thing that projects can do. And we at Quantstamp, we strongly recommend projects not to just have or to stop at an audit. There are so many other services that can be added in order to improve security, such as deployment verifications, monitoring once the project is live on mainnet, and incident response. Someone who, once there's an alert, can actually respond as soon as possible, right? So all of these things, in addition to a good, education of the developers when it comes to security, are necessary steps, in my opinion, for making this space more secure. And a regulator could basically have, a nice website where they have some indicators of what projects are doing with respect to security.
And wouldn't this be against the ethos of the crypto, like in general, again, pseudonymity to force protocols to have like KYC, AML, just to comply with the regulatory framework in general all around the world. Like when I go to a protocol, I don't expect that the people behind it are completely doxed and they have go through a KYC process. But I want it to work because I trust, the multiple audits, the way that the community also done an audit, and they said that yes, these things works and this don't, and why you have to pay attention is to this and that, because it could be probably harmful to your assets if you go like completely degen mode to that. And yeah, don't you think that it will be against the ethos of the pseudonymity to make sure everyone has a KYC AML?
That's a very good point. And one thing that I wanted to maybe clarify is that if they do a KYC with the regulator, it doesn't mean that they are fully doxed to everyone out there. So the KYC is not public. The KYC would be done by the regulator, and the regulator would know the team, but on their website, they don't need to. They could be, like anonymous avatars. They don't need to disclose their identity to the whole world. This would be something like a safety net in case a rug pull happens. Because whenever you go to a project which is anonymous, there is a high risk of a rug pull. It's not always the case, but there is this high risk.
Definitely.
So, there's a trade-off between being KYC'd by a regulator and a regulator knowing your identity. I think it's not very far from, having a passport, and the whole world knowing your identity. That's not necessary, if you KYC with the regulator and they know where they can find you if you do a rug pull, already gives the retail end users more peace of mind when depositing their funds.
Okay, this is an interesting approach. I usually say that DeFi is like building an airplane while flying. Would you say that this kind of sentence is accurate? And if so, how does that affect the way you approach security and insurance in this ecosystem particularly?
Yeah, that's a very nice statement, actually. I honestly have compared DeFi software development or like this kind of smart contract, not just DeFi, but any kind of smart contract development with, the most risky type of development, which is, of course, the aviation industry, right? So this is because, there's always this comparison between what's the worst thing that could happen in Web 2, in a Web 2 hack, right? And, it's not as bad in Web 2 as it is in Web 3, because in Web 3, you can directly steal funds from the smart contract, right? In Web 2, you need to do a few more extra steps to actually earn money, which is sometimes very difficult. But in Web 3, it's just there, right? So it's extremely risky. It's maybe not as problematic as an airplane crashing, right? Where that's way more, but still there's a clear, similarity between the type of discipline that developers should have in the aviation industry and in DeFi. Now, the problem is that in the aviation industry, there are clear regulations and very, very strict ones. And in DeFi, there's none. So basically in DeFi, people can, build a plane while flying it, which would not be allowed in the aviation industry, of course. So Yeah, I think like the statement is very nice because it also shows the urgency of many projects wishing to launch as soon as possible to gain, the first mover advantage, to gain a large user base, right? So that there's always this rush. Uh, it's a very nice statement. Like, yeah, congrats for it, and maybe I'm going to use it as well.
I'm pretty sure that I'm not the only one to use it, but yeah, I really does like to say that. Audits are seen as some kind of security seal of approval for DeFi protocols. But in light of I said recent hacks, but there are like hacks like all the time. You can say that it could be rug pull or stuff like that, but sometimes it's real hacks.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
and some people may argue that they are more like a seal of false hope, which yeah, this is some kind of statement. And how does Quantstamp restore trust in the efficacy of audits and yeah, trustness in that?
Yeah, this is indeed a very difficult thing for. Um, I think this has to do with what we've discussed earlier, with the lack of having a regulator,
Yeah.
and with this, in my opinion, the biggest misconception in the space of, when someone says that we have an audit, it means that we're secure. This is one of the biggest misconceptions, in my opinion. And it goes back to what I've said before. If someone receives an audit, we as auditors cannot force them to fix the issues. So if you look at the audit report, and I'm not kidding, there's, I think, a large proportion. I'm not going to say like a specific number because I don't have it, but way more than half of the audits do not fix all the issues. You know, there's very rarely. I actually had a presentation at EFCC a couple of years ago showing how many of the audits have fixed all the issues, and there are extremely few at that point, right? And we've done maybe more than double the amount of audits since then. Things haven't changed, right? So if you get an audit and you don't fix the issues, you're of course not secure. It's no question about it. It's even, like some projects, they do not publish their audit report because the audit report clearly indicates what problems they have. However, there have been projects that have published their audit report with clear issues that were not fixed. And later we've seen attackers exploiting those issues. So in those cases, having an audit is actually even worse. If you're putting out the report with unfixed issues, you're basically telling attackers like, hey, here's what this project has, as an issue. You can just go and figure out how to exploit it, and sometimes it's not difficult, right? So that's a huge problem, because there's no regulator to force some projects to fix issues. And, what we've noticed is that the community is often content with seeing a tweet saying, we've been audited, and people tend to say we've passed the audit, and that doesn't mean anything because
Yes.
an audit is a paid service by the customer. It's not done by a certification authority or a regulator. Only then could you say we've passed the audit. You've just bought an audit. It's just an audit report. It's an audit report that you paid for. It could have so many unfixed issues.
Sure.
So what I would urge, the community to do is actually read the audit before deploying any funds into a protocol.
And this is one of the last question I wanted to address to you. And this is really important because some people that I can say rookies, normies, people going, I'm starting their journey in the crypto space, in the crypto ecosystem. They are certainly not able to read this kind of document, or when I say read, to understand this kind of documents. How do you make sure? How do you help people to have a better understanding of those reports, audits made
Mhm.
by your companies or like audit firms in general?
Yeah, we honestly try to make it as simple as possible. And that's why on the first page of all our reports, you're going to see a small table with the number of issues that have been found. Then you're going to see a breakdown of the severity, like high, medium, low, informational, how many issues of each type have been found, and how many were fixed, only mitigated, or acknowledged, right? And if someone opens and only looks at this table, they already get a good feeling about how risky this project is. Because if they see everything or a large majority of the high and medium severity issues were fixed, if all of the high and medium severity issues were fixed and only a few low and informational issues were acknowledged, that's already a very good indicator that this is something that you can feel comfortable with. But if you open this, look at the table, and you see a lot of high severity issues or medium severity issues just acknowledged, then you basically need to go through the report, read those issues if you can understand them. We try to make it really clear for even normies, to understand what the impact would be, and only if you're comfortable with that impact can you continue. But we make it as simple as just look at the first page. Sometimes I've seen reports where you need to scroll through a lot of the pages through the report to see how many issues were found and how many were fixed. We really want to make it as simple as possible. First page, there's like a treasure trove of information in there. I actually made a presentation about this back in February at the conference. It's recorded on YouTube, so you can it's like 5 easy steps to tell if a Web3 project is secure. And all of them have to do with just simply Googling, finding the audit report, and looking at the first page.
Okay, yeah. And would you say, I like this question. Would you say that when you enter a protocol and you see that it has been audited by some companies, it could be a red flag?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So this is my last question before we go to the second part of the podcast. With all these hacks and exploits becoming some common headline in the DeFi ecosystem, that we saw them every day on the medias, and there are some media specialized in like reporting those hacks. How do you sleep at night knowing that you are answering those protocols?
Well, actually, that's a very good question. So, what we can do as an insurance company is say that we only insure a protocol if they actually pass their audit, right? And not just the audit, they need to have a deployment verification, they need to have monitoring, and they need to have incident response, right? So we only insure the most secure protocols out there. That's, like the advantage that we have because we can select our customers that we insure. I would not be able to sleep at night if we needed to insure everything because that is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
So, as an insurance company, you sort of have a similar power to what a regulator would have, in the sense that you have your own whitelist, and you're only allowing the best of the best on that list.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And now we are entering a new format for this podcast. This is the yay or nay question. So I will ask you several questions, and you are only allowed to answer by yes or no. And you have one joker that you can use for a question. And so if you want to use this joker, you are not. I mean, you are not obliged to answer this question. Are you good with that?
Ooh, I'm nervous. I'm pretty nervous. How many questions did you say?
There will be 11 questions. So at the end, if you, not answer one question, we will have like 10 questions.
Okay.
Okay, first question. If Celsius network, had been audited by Quantstamp, would I still have my money today?
No.
Do we need an audit for the auditors?
Yes.
Is it fair to say that Quantstamp audit has become somewhat of a hacker's checklist rather than a security badge of honor?
No.
Do you feel the DeFi community has lost faith in audits, especially when projects like Alpha Finance and Rary Capital get hacked post-audit?
No.
Do you believe that the average crypto user associates an audit with assured safety even after they mention security breaches?
Yeah.
Considering the high-profile breaches following audits, would you agree that there is room for significant improvement in the auditing process?
Yeah.
Looking at the recurring breaches in audited DeFi protocols, would you admit that even blockchain's promise of transparency and immutability may be overestimated?
Yes.
Could it be true that while blockchain revolutionized many aspects, it also opens a new Pandora boxes of security vulnerabilities?
Yes.
Are NFTs just fancy JPEGs?
No.
Let's pause for a second here. Sebi misunderstood the question and thought I was talking about USDT instead of UST. That's why his answer was yes instead of no.
Would you accept to be paid in UST if it goes back to $1?
Yes. I don't have an opinion on UST.
Considering the array of coins and tokens available today, would you admit that the crypto market sometimes feels more like a digital zoo?
Can you repeat the question?
Considering the array of coins and tokens available today, would you admit that the crypto market sometimes feels more like a digital zoo?
Yes.
Congratulations, you pass all the 11 questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Sebi. Thank you for your time and thank you for your honest answers.
Ah, chills, literal chills.